Hello, I'm Deyan Sudjic, the Director of the Design Museum. Welcome to this remarkable room with its wonderful portraits that demonstrate fairly conclusively that to be a successful engineer you do need a certain amount of unnecessary facial hair. I'm here because I think that design matters. Design matters a lot. Design is something which shapes our economy, it creates jobs, and even more importantly, I think it helps us define who we are. I think a rich design culture is one which feels itself at the centre of things, and without that, one becomes at the periphery of things. A key part of that has to be that sense of the profession being fueled by a very strong educational sector. Education in design in all kinds has been something that Britain has been, in the past, fantastically good at. It's a great export, it's what's kept London and the UK in general full of creativity, of thinking, of freshness, and also, you have to say, of dissent. The art schools have been one of the glories of Britain's sense of itself. And we're here today because, for a number of reasons, it's time to take stock of where design and education are going, for a variety of reasons. Some have to do with money and the 40% cut in non-STEM subjects. But others, I think, are even more to do with what might be called unintended consequences, the sense that D&T might not form part of the core curriculum in the future. So we're here to start by taking stock, to launch a short film, which we'll see in a moment, which is just 8 minutes long, which is an attempt to focus our attention on this, to communicate to the wider political world and the educational world. And then after we've seen the film, 5 people who have first-hand experience of what design can do, both in education and in business, will be talking about the subject. We'll be speaking until about 6, then a question and answer, and then some drinks afterwards. So let's see the film, which I haven't seen yet either. So just to kick off the conversation, each of the 5 panellists are going to give us a 2-minute summary of why they're here, starting with Ellen.
Well, first of all, I made a decision that I never thought I'd make in my life, which was to leave my dream job of sailing around the world behind to concentrate on the subject of our futures. And it's that subject that brings me here, because through sailing I got this overwhelming understanding of what the word finite meant. And when I stepped off the boat at the last round the world, I realised that actually, like my boat, which has finite resources, our world is no different. And the result of that was a 5-year journey that's led to being here today, where I realised that actually we live in a finite world, so materials will only get more expensive, and energy will only get more expensive unless we redesign the way things work. And I believe that that is a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity. And the reason that I'm here is because I created the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, a charity set up to inspire a generation to rethink, redesign, and build a positive future. And I absolutely believe in that word design, because through designing things differently, we can create a system that works in the long term. And that's why I believe that young people coming through education, having that ability to think outside the box, having that ability to think creatively, is absolutely essential, because there is no way without creativity we will have those opportunities in the future.
Wow. Ajaz.
So thanks so much. Thank you, Deyan. Thank you for this event. So AKQA I founded over a decade ago, and today we employ about 1,100 people around the world, and our revenue is around 200 million. And I think it's true that we're the most awarded design company in the world right now in our sector. And just an interesting story is that when I started the company, and I'm not very good at a lot of things, but I'm not bad at hiring people. That's something that I'm okay at. And when I made one of my first hires, it was for a technology director. And I spoke to the headhunter, and I said, the person you hire has to be someone who's a mechanical engineer. And I just remembered that today, because we're here in the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. And the headhunter asked me, well, why is that? And I was pretty lucky when I was 15. I got to work for some software companies and some amazing organisations that made computer software. And the problem was that bugs were kind of tolerated And I thought to myself, as a start-up, there's no way that I can tolerate, any kind of loss of quality. It's got to be the quality we produce as a start-up has to be incredible. We have to make amazing work that works every time. And I just had this theory that mechanical engineers, the tolerance level is you can't make stuff that breaks. So I hired a brilliant mechanical engineer who understood software. And had I not done design and technology at school, I wouldn't have even known what a mechanical engineer is. So 1,100 jobs later and a huge amount of awards and some great clients, I'm lucky enough to be here.
Thank you. Mandy.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here because design and technology is the backbone of my business, and I can honestly say without it, I wouldn't have made a penny. I'm an inventor and entrepreneur. I'm probably best known for the Anyway Up Cup, which was a children's trainer cup that sealed when it came out of the child's mouth, so it saved everybody's carpets. It was always going to be successful, but I invested in design to add on to the intellectual property, the technology, and I saw a 4-fold increase in sales in a single year. I actually trained as a graphic designer. I've got a degree in graphics from St Martin's, and then I freelanced for a little while, and then I got pregnant, and I thought, well, I'll have the baby, go back to work. And then I found out it was twins, which shot that idea all to hell anyway. So I became a full-time mum, and my third child was born with feeding problems, and I had to improvise. And that's when my career changed, and I became an inventor. I had no background in product design and no engineering skills at all, but because I trained as a graphic designer, that was really about creative thinking, creative problem solving, and it enabled me to become an inventor. The one thing it didn't train me for was the legal shenanigans that were to follow when big companies ripped off my idea and I had to go to court to enforce my patents, so that was a bit of a learning curve. But my business, as a result of my business, we have set up UK manufacture, we've created UK jobs, and I've paid the government a huge amount of UK tax as well. But as a result of design and technology and intellectual property, my technology has revolutionised the nursery industry worldwide, and it currently sells 40 million cups using my technology around the world every year. So I'm quite pleased with that. So I'm very passionate about design and technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Jackson.
Thanks. I've never followed someone who's saved the carpets in my home before. It's a tough act to follow. I'm Chief Executive at Engineering UK, and what we try to do is unlock the potential of young people in engineering, which is well paid and creative if they can get access to it. And that could be at all levels. It can be going through a graduate route. It can be going through a more vocational route. There are great careers for a great variety of people. So a couple of the initiatives that we're involved in actually bring us into the design and technology world in the classroom as well. The Big Bang Fair and the National Science and Engineering competition that's in there, many of the entries into that competition have come from design and technology classes. And the Tomorrow's Engineers programme that links careers information out into schools. Of course, we're trying to work with design and technology teachers as well as teachers of science. So it's really important that we work with young people, but we don't ignore the teachers and the parents and also the policy makers. We tend to do that through the media. So is Creative Britain in reverse? Can I be contrary at the beginning and say, no, I don't think it is yet, but it is at risk. And I think that is really important because there's an opportunity for us to talk about doing something and to get on and do something soon. If we look at the wider STEM area, there are estimates that over the next decade, probably around half the jobs, rather more than half the jobs, will require STEM skills, and yet we've still got very few girls in particular going into engineering or taking physics at school. Britain actually is a success story here as the 7th largest manufacturer in the world. Just under 20% of Britain's GDP is within engineering, and certainly, that is building on the kind of things that you see in classrooms with design and technology. And if you look at particular examples, if you ask a young person where their iPad comes from, they probably say from Currys or somewhere like that, rather than acknowledging that the glass is being put together in the UK, that the processor has been designed in the UK. I suspect probably the Bluetooth chip has also been designed in the UK, and the designer was British originally from the whole family of products there. So Britain actually is very strong in bringing together great functional, great form products, and we need to make sure that we build on that in future. So what are the three key issues that I hope to get an opportunity to chat on later? Careers, curriculum, and the connections to business. Connecting schools, connecting the curriculum to business to get a better result in the subjects for those young people and show them what the opportunities are. The careers advice. If young people choose the wrong subjects at 14, in the UK, in many cases, they have to choose at 14. Actually, they block out many of the careers we'd like them to be involved in. And the curriculum's up for review. Let's make sure the review goes in the right direction and actually embraces the breadth of curriculum that can empower Britain's future economic success and give opportunities for those young people.
Thank you. Dick?
Hi, everybody. Well, I would start by saying that by many measures in the UK, we have a world-class creative industries sector. I think that's acknowledged across the globe. And we have that thanks to a world-class design education system, a system which is needed to continue to sustain it. So there are two issues here which have been talked about on the film. The first is design and technology not being core curriculum anymore. And on that subject, we've heard a lot already, but I would say one thing. What is the alternative? What we would see, I think, is a return to the 1950s. The art room, the carpentry shop, the metalwork shop, with children no longer being aware of what design is, what about careers in engineering and all the rest of it. It's a complete disaster if it's allowed to happen. And we must all work together to put a stop to it. The second thing is around the cuts in education. And it's my view that government actually, its left hand is clearly not connected to its right. And they probably don't appreciate how important creativity is to those very STEM subjects which they think are and are very important to innovation. And as I've said in print, I think they're in danger of washing the innovation baby out with the education bathwater. For me, this is not an issue of people in design, art and design education standing up and whinging about the cuts. That is not going to work. I think we have to take our share of the pain in paying off public debt. So for me, this is an opportunity, and I see this seriously as an opportunity to rethink both how we educate young creative people and the kind of funding that and how we organise the funding to put behind that. I think this is a key pivotal moment, as Richard said in the film, where we're in danger of going over the tipping point, and we really do need to take corrective action. I don't think, David Willits has said, well, he said to me at a thing the other day at the Design Council that this whole student funding thing, 9,000 fees and all the rest of it, will act as a process of self-selection. But my anxiety in all this is the loss of quality. The fall in quality. It's my view, and I know many people here will not agree with this, that we have seen over the last 15 years a gradual decline in the quality of our students coming from creative courses. And further salami slicing it by every single institution having to make cuts and fight over students is just going to debilitate it even further. And therefore, we need an alternative solution. And the alternative solution there are obviously many possible solutions. The one I'd like to see is where we establish a two-tier system, a return, if you like, to how things were with universities and polys to a certain extent, where we create acknowledged centres of excellence who, all the people in the creative industries could pick those colleges who produce the best students and have the best tutors and the best equipment and all the rest of it, and prioritise funding to centres of excellence to ensure that quality doesn't fall through the floor. That's my biggest anxiety in the proposed 40% cuts.
Dick, you had quite a lot to do with that film, which I thought hadn't seen it before. I thought it was, very powerfully put, very impressive range of people. What were you trying to achieve with it? What happens next?
Well, First of all, I'd like to say thank you, because we had a lot of help from the James Dyson Foundation, from the DT Association, and from the Design Council, from Paul Smith and lots of other people. But the basic point of the film is to make a lot of noise. I have not been involved deeply with the way the government runs. I mean, I did work on the Design Council for a while. We have an eminent MP over there who's a great supporter of design. But the wheels of government go through process, and that's a process we need to go through. I don't think we can avoid that. Our interest in making the film was to make a lot of passionate noise as quickly and succinctly as we could, and to try and get that film in front of some of those decision makers and parliamentarians, just to get their heads in the right place to realise how serious this is. That was the purpose.
And, I mean, obviously there's two strands, aren't there? One is the design and technology issue in schools, and the other is STEM funding. Starting with D&T, I mean, do you think that it's been deliberately targeted? Is it seen as being a second-tier subject, or is it a mistake? Is it unintended consequences, as I said earlier?
I don't know. I mean, I dare say our friends from the Design and Technology Association perhaps would like to speak about that. But, I mean, certainly in my experience, I was a governor of a school for 11 years, and despite the success of design and technology, it was still always seen by the academic brigade as a sort of lesser alternative for people who weren't very bright. That I'm afraid, is still quite deeply embedded in schools. Certainly not in the schools that I think we went to see, but in many, many schools that's still the case. And I think the 20 years of good work, it is 20 years ago that this happened. I think that the change has been immense. You can't meet a child today who doesn't know what design is. I mean, how good is that? And we're in danger of washing this away. And we should hear from the DT Association. Sure. I'm sure they've got the details on that.
Well, we'll bring in the audience towards the end of the half hour. Ajaz, what would have happened if you hadn't done D&T?
I've got absolutely no idea. But I think one of the things is that I'm just speaking as a consumer, and I suppose as an entrepreneur. And I think one of the things is that there's so many design problems that are yet to be fixed. And, because we're in a kind of consumer society, you think that everything's fixed. So, James Dyson, there's no question he's built a better wheelbarrow and built a better vacuum cleaner, and that's great. And Jonathan Ive and Steve Jobs, they've built a much better phone and a much better computer. But this weekend, it was my first weekend for years where I was kind of spare, so I made the stupid mistake that I'm going to get a juice blender. And I did some research online, and I looked at various products, and I bought one, and I used it, and it's unbelievable how bad they are. It's just one of these, it's extraordinary. And to me, it's like one of these things, well, if I was in education, I'd be giving a school a task to design the world's best juice blender, and it would just be the most extraordinary juice blender you've ever seen. And that they would just become rock stars, the Jonathan Ives of tomorrow, because they've just built a better product. And I think in design, in America, there's this problem where light switches. I don't know if you've seen the light switches in America. They're so ugly. They're just awful. They're really, really bad. And and I think, and then there's this new material in the UK which is actually made in Manchester called graphene. And graphene is like an atom thin, and it's somewhere in between graphite and silicon. And it's just going to transform material science. It's phenomenal. And again, it's such an opportunity for Britain, if it wants to champion that use of that material science into some phenomenal products if there's the inclination. So my point of view is I just speak as a consumer and an entrepreneur, a consumer who uses these things, and an entrepreneur who sees kind of so many opportunities every day.
Ellen, you were saying earlier that your father was a DT teacher. Does that shape the way that you see things?
It shaped my life, without question, because I grew up in a place where there were tools in the garage. As a kid, I was always in the garage making things. If I hadn't have been in the garage making things, using those tools, understanding how things work, there's no way I could have fixed a generator 2,500 miles away from the nearest town. And it's, many people think sailing, from my previous life, is just about sailing a boat fast and pointing in one direction. It's not at all. It's about creative problem solving. It's about looking at many, many different inputs, from water temperature to wind strength to the calories that I'm burning, processing all of those inputs and then making the right decision with them. And that involves that level of creative thinking that was inspired by being at home with the tools in the garage, making things, thinking about things. I would sit on a school bus in the morning, which probably makes me very square, and I'd have a notepad and I'd design bits for boats for hours and hours and hours. And then when I had a weekend, I would make them. And I think that feeling that you can, even with design, and earlier on today I was with a group of interns from the foundation who are spending a week with BT, and we were going to one of these big plants where they refurbish routers. And we were talking on the way back on the train. And they were saying, "Where are you going now?" And I was saying, "I'm going to this event at IMAKE, and we're going to be talking about the future of D&T." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Because there's a risk that D&T may be removed from the curriculum." They were horrified. Absolutely horrified. They had no idea. 3 of them came from Cardiff and went to a design and tech school. And this sparked off some conversation. And they said that D&T was one of their favourite subjects. They loved the fact it was hands-on. And one of the girls said, "I love D&T because D&T gives you skills for life." And when you think about education, the whole goal of education is that you prepare those young people for the rest of their lives. And a young person entering education last September won't retire until 2070. I would say that looking at the forecast of materials and energy prices, there is a massive need for thinking outside the box and being creative, and I think D&T is right at the centre of that. And they see that as an opportunity and have the opportunity through school to embrace that. I think that is absolutely essential, and those young people really felt that on the train. I'll never forget their faces.
Dick just whispered in my ear to remind me that, of course, Jonathan Ives' father was also a D&T teacher, and Jonathan, for his birthdays, used to get time in the workshop, and his dad would make him things. And it's just an extraordinary... I mean, actually, he's got the same focus as Ellen, too. If you look at Jonathan, the same kind of sense of...
I was with his dad on Saturday, actually.
Name dropping.
Through, as I spoke at the Design and Technology Association Annual General Conference, because he's involved with that.
Dick, the other end of the equation is the STEM subjects and the cuts in funding. And you were talking about that there is no sense in saying, no, we've got to share the pain. But do you think there's some scope for design in some forms joining the STEM subjects in higher education?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital that it does. I mean, I was at the D&AD Awards a couple of weeks ago. There was a bunch of students, because we merged the student awards with the professional awards, and I assembled these students together, and I asked them, I said, how much have you borrowed to do your course? So this is after 3 years. And universally, they said between £25,000 and £30,000 for that 3-year course. Well, post next year, when the new fees come in, that's going to translate to £45,000 to £48,000. And I said, would you pay that? And they said, no, almost to a man. So the net result of that will be a massive fall in student numbers, and more critically, what I'm really concerned about is the talent. You know, the people who have the ambition, the ability, the passion, the talent to go into a career in the creative industries. And we're not just talking about design. We're talking, remember, about advertising, about a load of other industries, fashion, textiles. You know, there's a massive range of industries that are supported by the creative industries. And those children will not go and pursue that career at that cost. And that's a disaster for the UK, I think, what is happening. And we have to get as much energy and passion behind finding a solution. Because, as you say, I mean, I think that it's no good saying to government, we're special. Because we're not that special. But what is important, the connection to make to government, is the intimate connection between the creative industries and our ability to innovate and sustain our manufacturing industries. And those two are inextricably linked, wedded at the hip. And we have to really, really make that point to government and find a way to ensure that the best colleges retain funding that allows talented students who can't afford it to attend.
Well, there is this curious situation where David Willits goes to Brazil to try and sign up potential students for our educational system in design and other things. But what seems to be happening is that our educational system will become less desirable because of the way that the system is being shifted by the cuts.
Well, I think that it's a short-term view, because we can only sustain a high intake of foreign students by producing quality kids at the other end. As soon as standards fall, as I believe they have, and I have a role in Singapore, and people talk there about no longer sending design students to the UK, because there are other places in the world doing a damn sight better job than we are. So how long is the foreign student thing going to sustain our colleges? I mean, just to go back a bit, I don't want to hog the floor here, but, when I was at college, there were 12 people in my year, 12 students. At Central now, there are over 100 students a year with only one member of staff. This isn't, design and the creative industries are not a chalk and board subject. You can't put 100 people in a lecture theatre and talk to them about design. It's a different sort of education. It can't be done in the same way. So that's why I believe the quality of our student output has fallen greatly, despite the heroic efforts by our lecturers, who I think are just fantastic and do a fabulous job in difficult circumstances. So we need to find a solution.
Yeah, I had a year being a dean at a distinguished university where my job was to explain to the administration why design students might need studio time,
really?
Access to studios 24 hours a day. Mandy, what do you think your experience has to offer people who teach D&T?
Well, I think that business is about intellectual property, and the government wants to drive intellectual property. That's all it's talking about these days, is the importance of intellectual property. And I know it was said on the film, but I'm going to say it again because to me it's a very important point, that if you stifle creative thinking, kids in academic subjects and the way that our system is structured, it's about ticking boxes. You have to get the right answers. You get the marks if you get the right answer. If you think outside the box and you give different answers, you don't get the marks, not in those academic subjects. But design and technology is all about thinking outside of the box. And I just fear terribly that without that education, not only would they not be thinking outside the box, but you're stuffing them very firmly in the box. So how are you going to get innovation and new intellectual property being developed by our young people if they don't think differently to everybody else? Our education is about thinking the same. It's a bit worrying.
Thank you. Paul?
I'd like to pick up on that point, because I think it's a really important one. And the two are not opposed. Doing well in the academic subjects and delivering good project work that pushes the boundaries, these are not opposites. Actually, they can be wholly complementary. And I think there is a risk in focusing only on a limited set of subjects, that we won't see young people doing the kind of project work within, particularly the area that I'm concerned with, within the STEM area, that pushes the boundaries for them and gives them an opportunity to develop something that involves perhaps a circuit, the application of it, so people would want it as a product. I know my daughter brought home an ice cream-shaped torch from her design and technology class, where she'd looked at the packaging, she'd looked at the electronic circuit, she'd looked at putting the battery in there and so on, the cost of manufacturing it, a whole range of factors. Well, none of those were actually in her textbook. They were all things that she'd had to take things from the course and then drive that bit further. When we see in the National Science and Engineering competition some of the great projects that come forward, the kids have actually pushed at the boundaries. They've learned more. And can I quote you an example? Because one of my great favourites in the first year that we brought this together, the Big Bang, was a young woman who'd done a supermarket trolley that wouldn't wander off on its own. So she'd come up with this design, and she'd actually put the wheels on in a rather different way. And I was showing around the former science minister, one Lord Sainsbury, and seeing this young woman explain to David Sainsbury what should be done with a supermarket trolley without realising actually what his background was just tremendous. It also allowed her to develop her communication skills, because she was explaining what she'd done in this project, how she'd brought it together, the different ingredients. So it was a wonderful example of actually a rounded education that I'm sure will have helped her with her maths achievement and other subjects as well, rather than just getting a good grade in her project.
Ellen, could you tell us a little bit more about what your foundation is doing with interns and so on, what you're trying to achieve with that?
Well, the goal of the foundation, as I said, is to inspire a generation to rethink, redesign and build a positive future. And we do that through the framework of something called the circular economy. And the idea of the circular economy is it is full of opportunities looking forwards towards the future, because we look at cycling materials, both biological and technical. So it's the equivalent of using things, not using them up. And that really excites the young people. And what we do with them is we encourage them to question. We ran a big event in March this year called Project Redesign, where we took 1,000 A-level students from right across the country in 5 locations, and we set them a challenge. And the challenge was, after landfill, what next? And we explained to them there was new regulation coming in, we wouldn't be able to landfill. And what was fascinating with these young people is when you give them some tasters, you give them ideas, and I'll explain. We had a plastic bag, which looks just like a plastic bag, designed to take magazines. But when you put it in water, it dissolves. And it turns into something which is totally non-toxic. So suddenly they begin to question, because a plastic bag to them is negative. But yet this bag is a nutrient. It's something positive. I gave an example of a scientist I met over in Germany who made ice cream packaging with an ice cream manufacturer. Come back to the ice cream subject. And this packaging said on it, "Please litter." And that's not something that you're used to seeing, but it said "please litter" because this scientist was trying to turn young people's thinking on its head. Because it said, "Please litter," because it was totally non-toxic, totally biodegradable, and in the paper were wild, rare flower seeds. And so it's this different way of thinking. Young people could think, what if the whole system was reorientated towards a system that could work long-term? What if we redesign the whole system? What if actually landfill, they don't look at landfill and say, how do we deal with the problem? They redesign it from the beginning. They design it out. Why do we design something that's used once and we know is either going to get burnt, therefore that resource is lost forever, or it's going to end up stored underground and lost forever? They don't see that. They don't see that as a place we want to get to, because there's another route. And so the Foundation's work is all around inspiring young people to think differently. And the questions that they come up with last week, to come back to the internships, one of the internships is working at Renault Technocentre. There are 5 young people from across the country, and they've been working with the design team. Now, Renault Technocentre is just outside Paris. It employs about 14,000 people on one site, and it's where they design and test build the Renault cars. And the questions they were asking the designers were incredible. It was amazing to spend time with these young people. They're asking, why can't you design this differently? And how about doing like this? Really, really questioning, really thinking outside the box, seeing the opportunities. And I think that's the biggest word that I have from this is, if you inspire a young person to think differently, if you inspire them to think of a different way that things can be designed and made, and I see this very much as a design question, then they see nothing but opportunities. And just to come back to the Design and Technology Association, I was at their annual general conference on Saturday, and I was talking to one of the teachers who'd been working with the team at the Foundation, in fact, James, who's here in the audience. And this teacher had been working with his students around the subject of the circular economy. And a young lad came up to him and he said, how do you feel about how your work's going? And he said, I find this fascinating. He said, because before we studied this, when I was doing my GCSEs, I couldn't think of anything that needed designing. Now, he said, I look at everything and I know it needs redesigning. He sees the absolute opportunity in it, and I think that's why this subject is so, so precious.
Ajaz, what do you think design is?
It's a philosophical question.
Well, I suppose what I'm getting at is the way that it keeps shifting its shape. I mean, when we first met, you came to the Design Museum and you were sitting in what was our library. And I remember you saying, the people that work with me don't see books like this. Design was once one thing, and now it's become a different thing, which is why I think it's important. I'm answering the question. What do you think design is?
So I think design at its best is inspirational, and I think the things that inspire me are, phenomenal architecture, which just makes you go, wow, or something that's just beautiful. There's a James Dyson lecture, which he does at MIT, which everyone should listen, because it's just one of the most inspirational lectures I've ever seen. It's kind of mesmerising, and it just shows his genius and what an inspirational person he is. But I think, but just kind of from my perspective, there's architecture and there's industrial design, but one of the areas that the UK doesn't lead in, and it has a huge opportunity to lead in, is software. And so when you talk about what's design, you don't see the evolution of software. So Twitter didn't come from the UK, Facebook didn't come from the UK, Amazon didn't come from the UK, and you have all these, and books. Since we're talking about books, it's not going to be long before books are just considered luxury objects. They're going to be seen as luxury objects. Tablet computers today cost around £300. In less than a year, they're going to be 50 quid. In 2 years' time, they're going to be 20 quid. And that's just going to happen. There's no question. And when that happens, it becomes cost prohibitive to produce thick, beautiful books that we're used to, and they just become luxury items. And it comes back to your point, it often creates more waste than it does more good. So the point is that what's design? Design's everything. But I think the focus should be beautiful, elegant, sustainable design, and that's the design that interests me.
Any advance on that, Dick? What's design for you?
I think design is the application of creative endeavour to commercial and human purpose. The phrase that we've always liked at Seymourpowell, and we called the TV series after it, actually, is that, which is called Better by Design, is that design is about making things better for people. So your mum, your granny, your sister, your baby. Better for business. This is not art, it's a commercial act, and better too for the world.
Paul?
Of course, I'd take a slightly different view, because I'd see it in a wider context. Yeah. And I think that's actually really, really important. I would see the contribution of design in a manufacturing process, which I think is really, really important with the agenda that Ellen's now pressing, that we need to get more effective in the way in which we manufacture things, the way in which we can reuse things. This all needs to be built in at the beginning. So it's not just about the look, it is about the form, the function of a product, and all of the ingredients that go into it. And that is why I think, bringing design technology, actually I'd call it design engineering and technology, but hey, with EngineeringUK as the place I come from, that wouldn't surprise you. I think actually that's really, really important. It comes together, and what we've got to be really careful of in these difficult times is that we don't end up with prioritising in the sense of, it's got to be about the look or it's got to be about the function. Actually, if Britain's going to be successful economically, all of those elements need to be there, because that's what sells good products. That juice blender may have looked brilliant, but if it didn't work, then you're never going to buy another one or recommend it to anyone. It's got to be the form and the function.
I think no one would dispute that's what design is. I think we all take a broad view of these things. And what is function? It's about emotional function as well as technical function. And as Oscar Wilde once said, only a fool does not judge by appearances. Mandy, what do you think design is?
The short answer is design is money. I mean, we redesigned our products, we got it working better, we made it better than anything else, plus it had intellectual property, and we took 40% market share in the UK. That's what design is. I mean, to me, it's that's commercial, and design emotionally is what gives me a huge buzz. I mean, when you have something, and I've seen so many products which are wonderful ideas technology-wise, but in terms of will they ever reach the market, will they ever work right, will they ever be producible at the right price? No, they won't, because they need to be properly designed. And I just feel if you take away design, creative thinking, we're going to fail so badly as an economy. It's quite frightening.
You use the word inventor as well, which is an interesting word, which is, to me, I suppose design is what makes an invention applicable. That's a fair thing to say.
Yeah. to me, inventing is where you're creating something that didn't exist before, and design is making that but making it better. It's the making it better. It's making it usable, it's making it at the right price. That's, to me, where the design comes in. But design, it's about quality of life, isn't it? I mean, my house is full of things that I feel are great design, and that's what gives me pleasure in life. And if we don't have the best design and we don't have people capable of producing it, I think we're all going to suffer really badly.
Well, technology on its own doesn't produce a usable product. I mean, design is what makes the technology work. It's what applies it.
Yes, exactly. It's the application.
Well, we've got an audience. We welcome some contribution or some questions. Lots of hands shooting up. Helen, do we have a microphone? Or are we going to shout?
Hi. Is this on?
Yes.
Yes. Helen Charman, Head of Learning at the Design Museum. I think this discussion is really interesting when we think about the extent to which design is about the future. But actually, this curriculum review is foisting a moment of retrospection into this discipline. And it reminded me of this rather beautiful quote by, I think it's Hegel, who said, the owl of Minerva only flies at dusk. We only know what we're potentially losing in these moments of transition. And because design is about meeting challenges and kind of solving problems, it seems that the main thing now is that the future is really pressing in on us. And I think Ellen really articulated that beautifully. And in this, there needs to be lots of changes. The context is so important for design. The world is now and it will be. So it's an opportunity to rethink the subject of design education in schools. I don't think it's the best subject it possibly could be. This process is enabling us to become, to form perhaps a more cogent understanding of the distinctiveness of design education. Dick, you said, design isn't necessarily special. Well, it is distinctive. There are things about this subject which you don't find in other subjects across the curriculum. And I think it's great that we're articulating those values, almost a sort of ethos in design education. But what we're going to need once we get the subject right is fantastic teachers, building on the fantastic teachers that we already have. And so I want to really ask the panel, what is it that will enable this potentially refined, newly minted design education in schools, which is going to stay on the curriculum because it's absolutely essential. What kind of qualities do we want to instill in our design educators to enable them to be inspiring, to really understand the 21st century complex world that we are educating young people in? What do we want from our teachers?
Can we let that question hang provocatively in the air for a moment? And we'll take some more points. David Kester, do you want Hannah, just right behind you?
No,
David.
Hi, David Kester. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the D&T Association and Seymourpowell for actually raising the debate, and I thought it was a really, really good session. First of all, I mean, my question to the panel, and I suppose it's really to everybody in the room, is really what next? And it was a point that you raised, Deyan, at the beginning. And I have an observation and a suggestion. My observation is, you said, has this been done on purpose? Have we been singled out? My observation is quite clearly not. And D&T is in exactly the same boat, as I understand, as economics, drama, art, and the other subjects. So I think the first point is we must make sure, my observation is, that we don't walk in with a chip on our shoulder, but we go into this conversation at the moment with policymakers, with actually putting the front foot forward, which is all the arguments that I thought were well articulated in the film and have come from the panel. But my suggestion that I'd like to put forward is we should build off the recent comments from government. And Dick, you and Deyan, you were both at the summit with David Willits. And on that day, David Willits, on behalf of the government, said that they will make design essential. Those were their exact words, in print, from the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. They will make design essential to their strategy for innovation and growth. That innovation strategy is due out in November. There is enough time to influence it. And during the period between now and the end of September, there is the opportunity to do just that. And I was with David Willits last week, and he said, can we, as in the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, put the school curriculum and the issues around design and technology into the innovation strategy? Now, he was asking that question. And the answer that was coming from around the table was absolutely you can. So I would suggest that the door is partly open, and the important thing that we need to do now is put forward some very, very coherent arguments, a policy which the government can actually put into print and then indeed implement. So my suggestion would be that we work together now and very, very fast, and I'd like to suggest that all the panel members, but others in this room, actually join forces quite quickly. And the Design Council is very eager and willing to support that exercise.
Do you want to pass the mic on? There's a eager hand here in the middle.
Yeah, Steve Roberts, Fripp Design and Research. We're an industrial design business based in Sheffield. And David, it's just echoing your points that this is an interesting debate, but ultimately, what are we going to do about it? The one thing, Paul, I take a point you said, I absolutely agree with you, is that it's great having design, it's great having technology, but you do need the engineering to glue it all together. And we do know that the government is very keen on engineering, promoting engineering. And, you know, we are a creative sector of which communication is an important one. Maybe we need to change the message slightly in terms of it's not just about design, it's not about technology, it's about engineering because they all are integrated, all part of the same thing.
Any other points? Well, you've got the mic.
As well. David Sibbald from Fulham Cross School. I think David next to me has also got a point. It's to do with perceptions, and it's the perception of the subject itself. I don't think that people see how vital it is, and I don't think that government ministers actually see it for what it is. It is, in essence, you were asking what design is all about. It's about creativity. It's the one subject, or the suite of subjects, where you use the right-hand side of the brain, where you are creative, where you think for yourself and you think outside the box. I have to say that the other subjects that are suffering even now because of the English baccalaureate are music, and the music industry is huge in this country, is art and is design and technology. These are the subjects that, because of the English bac, are being pulled back already. So it's happening in secondary schools. And you may not be aware of it, but schools are looking again at the curriculum. If you have to include history, you have to include a modern foreign language, that has a knock-on effect on some of our subjects.
Any other points? There's a hand over there.
Hi, I'm Emily Campbell from the RSA. Somebody finally just mentioned art. It struck me that there's another subject lurking in the curriculum that hasn't been mentioned this evening called art and design. And I'd just like to know if the panel are happy with the divorce of design technology from art and design that the national curriculum has perpetuated.
We'll let that one hang in the air as well. Up there.
Hi, I'm David Matthews from Times Higher Education. You touched on the coming changes to higher education in your speeches over the past hour. Obviously, we're seeing higher fees. We're also seeing potentially a move towards vocational subjects where students can repay those fees, and we're also seeing a big teaching grant cuts to non-STEM subjects. And I just, if you're taking questions, of course, then I'd just like to ask the panel how they think all these changes will impact the future of design in Britain from a higher education perspective.
Would one of the panel want to answer that question? Maybe you do.
God, there's so many things there I'd like to talk about, but you would like me to address that particular question. So as I said, I think the the long-term impact, as Richard said on the film, we will quickly cross a tipping point and see a collapse in quality of the output of our design education system as it is. We've seen it gradually being salami sliced over the last 15 years. This, I think, will tip it over the edge. And in the longer term, that's a disaster for the UK. We have, as I said earlier, probably the strongest creative industry sector in the world per capita. I don't know whether that's a fact. There are people in the audience here who probably tell me otherwise, but certainly one of the strongest. And that is as a result of having a design education system that has created all these businesses and with huge success. I think we will see its partial collapse if it's allowed to go ahead.
Okay, great answer. Now you can answer some of the other questions.
Yeah, David. So Design Council. First of all, I think it's your job and your role to do what you're doing, and we thank you for it. And I would say that event a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was terrific. David Willits, because it was me who asked the question about design and technology in schools, and he said to me afterwards, I didn't know that was happening. So to my point about government left and right, is clearly just building awareness. So what you're doing, what this event is doing, about building awareness about what the government is doing is a very, very important thing. So that's to that point. We haven't talked to the point that I think David from Fulham Cross mentioned about the English Baccalaureate is another creeping action which I think will have a tipping point effect as regards design and technology in schools. Because the English Baccalaureate, I'm not an expert on these things, but as I understand it militates against some of these non-core subjects to the extent that schools will cut them out in order to achieve the right level of assessments and gradings and what have you that go with that. I don't know. I'm sure someone from the DT Association will talk about that. I would like to say something about art and design. Emily, your point, because I do think, and to the point that was made, is it Helen? Yeah, that Helen made, that designing technology in schools is not perfect. And I think the bifurcation of design into these two subjects is, I think, a mistake. Design and technology and art are happy bedfellows, in my view. And the closer design and technology is to art, the better it is, in my view. So I don't think that design and technology education in schools is perfect. Long way from being perfect. But as you say, this is a chance, perhaps, to rethink it.
Any other observations from the floor? Back row, lady in black.
Hi, Judith Mottram from Nottingham Trent University. I think that we've just touched on a very interesting point, art and design and technology. Neither are perfect, but from the university sector, I'm very well aware that we have one of the largest parts of the university sector is the people who want to do creative arts and design. So I'm still optimistic, and what I'm particularly optimistic about is actually coming together of the different bodies who are interested to actually address and look forward about how we can actually improve where we are.
Anybody else? Front row. Front row. That's down here at the front. Right here at the front.
Hi, thank you. And my name's Stephen Taylor. I'm the chief executive of this institution. I just happened to be in our library this morning. I was trying to get some quotes for a presentation I was giving, and I was reading the second minutes of the minutes of the second meeting ever of this institution, and it was in 1847. And he was chairing it. He's called George Stephenson, and that's his son Robert Stephenson there. And they had a list of things they wanted to do, and they all have the same words attached to them. And it was about publishing paper. We want to publish a paper for the greatest design. Those are the words they used on all of this, and they were to do with axles for railways. And steam valves for actuators. But they all use the words great design. And these are engineers. And we've been talking about a number of things here about getting the curriculum right. You can't do in our schools at a level, you can't do art and maths and physics. And you can't, there isn't a route, or much of one at all, into higher education. And I know that. My father was an engineer, my mother was an artist and a musician, and I wanted to do both and couldn't. The same applied to my daughters. And so, why am I rambling on like this? I want to make an offer, because I think what we just heard from the Design Council is absolutely right. We do need to mobilise ourselves. We have an Engineering Council and a Design Council. I don't think they talk very much together. And I do think that institutions like this want to really mobilise it. It's great that we're having this discussion in this building, and the office open. We will work together, this institution, and we'll get some other institutions, to actually make sure, I think, we have a really powerful message joined together to get this message back into government. And we need to be much more effective at what we do. But what I also wanted to ask Rich, there's the offer. And we can, and let's work to do that, and we'll talk afterwards. But the other thing I wanted to ask you is whether you feel that there's a real vision. You don't get anywhere unless you know the journey you want to go on. So, for example, if you want to design, I'll just give one example. I can think of loads of them. But if you want to design the best railway carriages in the world, you do need a kind of vision for the railway system you want them to go on. And at the moment, our vision for railway system actually puts us, after high-speed rail and cross-rail, at the bottom of the European League for Railways in 10 years' time. And I could say the same about other industries. So apart from getting some of the operational stuff right, the curriculum right, getting young people enthused, and I may say more women into science, engineering, design and technology, what do we do about this? What do we do about this vision? To make sure that we're actually on the right path and making sure that everything else that follows gets that right.
I have to say it's great to be in this room with this range of people here, because this conversation hasn't really been shared with different people at the moment, and it's a very good sign for what could be. This could be a starting point. Lots more hands. That one over there.
Richard Seymour can't be here this evening, but I had the privilege of talking to him at some length about these issues. And he talks, doesn't he, Dick, about there being a second Renaissance and an opportunity here, and like we had Renaissance woman, Renaissance man, bringing various disciplines together. We've heard Emily mention about what about art. We've had lots about maths. We've had on the video people talking about bringing together maths, science, business, design and technology, to make it a coherent whole, to give it meaning for students, whether that be in school or whether that be in university. I'm really interested in what the panel's view has on this. Listening to Ellen talking about circular economy on several occasions now, that's not just about design, it's not just about manufacturing, it's not just about science, it's not just about business, it's all those things coming together, and that's what makes it work. Talking to you yesterday, Ajaz, on email was fascinating, and you were pointing out, I think, that in the States, some of the most esteemed courses seem to be getting that. Now, I'm worried that in this country, a product not just at school, but also at university level with some of our courses, we're seeing entrenchment. We're seeing entrenchment because of a need to survive and a move away from cross-curricularity and bringing these subjects together towards studying one particular discipline. And certainly it seems to us that that is a desire from this current administration. It's about subjects, it's about traditional disciplines, and it's not about bringing them together to be far more productive and address some of the issues that most eloquently Ellen's pointed us in the direction of today.
Down here in the front.
As a DT teacher, I'm always on the lookout for good briefs for my students to work on over the summer holidays. And I think I'm hearing two design briefs here this afternoon. One of them is actually as a T-shirt design brief, which would contain the essence of a message that needs to get across to Mr. Gove, because I think that a lot of what we've been hearing is probably still a bit too difficult for him. So I think that there is a T-shirt design, and it needs to probably mention the word real and problem and solving and people.
It's a big T-shirt, obviously.
Well, maybe small writing. It's a wraparound. We'll make it a pashmina, perhaps. The second design brief is actually for a plan B for the delivery of D&T, because we're putting a huge amount of faith in schools as the only way in which DT can be delivered. And I think that there are more ways in which this can be done. This year I run a thing called Design Camp, as well as being a teacher of DT. And this year we have opened up in Belfast. And we haven't been able to get any support from the education department there. We have got support from the museums. And I think that the museum education world has got a lot to do here, nudge. And that there has to be a plan B as well, because I don't know over the next 2 years what's going to happen with schools.
Don't forget the blender. That's the third one.
Hello, panel. My name is Frank Stegel. I'm MD of Art, and we're a physical special effects company. So I'm very fortunate that we employ artists, scientists, and engineers. They all mix it together, and we create amazing things that come up on television and film and exhibitions. And maybe we can do something about the blender as well. Something real world. Over the last year, I've been holding one-day learning and education for children aged 14 to 15. We have up to 25 children come into our studios. We're taking them through a day of special effects, model making, and all the other things we get up to. And we run a little competition during the day for them to come up with a product idea. And within 20 minutes, they've come up with a product idea, which is futuristic. They then have to create a story and a brief to actually advertise it in the afternoon using some of the special effects that we allow them to use. These children are fantastic. They're creative, they're brilliant, they're quick, they're inspiring. And the other day, they were very inspiring. As a team of girls, they came up with a new hair product. There probably is one somewhere in the world, but it was just fantastic how they thought about whether you're in rain, wind, smoke, fire, that your hair stays the same. No good for me, I had. But it was just brilliant how they come up with these ideas. But when I start asking questions around the subject matter that you go into to become, a special effects person or an engineer or a scientist, etc., we get to D&T, unfortunately they say it's boring. I'm sorry, Mr. Teacher behind you. And that is the majority of them coming through, and they're 14-year-old children who have been put off the subject to even go and study it. That's not a good thing. We need to do something about making it more exciting, interesting, linking it to the things like EngineeringUK do with the Big Bang. The kids that I've met there from there, they are excited. I have seen them. I actually get involved with Big Bang. I'll speak to Paul later about that. But that's what we need to be doing, making it, dare I say the word, sexy, exciting, see what the output's like for them, making great blenders and where it all starts at the beginning, to get this UK country, back up in the, I suppose, the big lights, if you like, that we are an amazing country who can create, design, make and produce and get out there to the commercial world, some fantastic products and services. So, and I see that from real world. So let's make these 14-year-olds feel good about education, whether they go into apprenticeships or to university. I think most of them are probably going to go to apprenticeships if we get it right.
Next. We're running out of time, so I'm going to have to probably just take two more people. Maybe one up there.
Hi, my name's Mark Dunhill. I'm from Central St Martin's. I welcome the comments that colleagues have made about the link between, not to see design and technology as a sort of single track subject, that it needs to be closely understood in relation to the other arts. And I'm partly here as a Dean of Fine Art to say that we're also in the fine art community looking at how we can lobby government. And what a shame if we do this independently couldn't we try and join this up a little bit and do it together so we make a combined message? I agree with Dick that we within the universities and colleges, if we go to government directly, we will just be seen as whinging and complaining that we're not getting enough of something and so on. We are facing huge problems, and it's going to be an enormous challenge, I think, to confront the higher fees and how that's going to impact on students in all sorts of very complex ways that we're trying to figure out at the moment. I just wanted to also pick up on the point that Mandy made, that she studied graphic design, but she became an inventor, somebody interested in products. What that's talking about, is transferable skills, that you may study something, but it doesn't preclude you from being interested in other things and even, therefore, transferring your knowledge from one place to another. Central St Martin's is just about to move to an enormous new building in King's Cross, where all of the courses, this ranges from drama, acting courses and so on, to design and art, are all moving under one roof. And the exciting thing about that is the way in which those students can work across those disciplines. Not specifically in, well, some new courses, but just to be hanging out with each other, just to be aware. Actually, as I did when I was at college with Dick myself at the RCA, aware of the crossovers that can exist between subjects. It's very, very important that we build on this and develop it. Cross-disciplinarity is, frankly, where we're going out there in the world, I think. We need to understand that.
I think that's a good note to end on. I will take away from this evening a sense of we're starting something important. I'd like to thank a very inspirational panel and a great film, and there's some drinks afterwards.